All right, everyone, welcome back to Great D's, where we get together every Wednesday night to discuss whether it be current events or events of that happened a very long time ago, or it be debates or decisions or great personalities. But we come to talk Torah and we come to learn Torah and hopefully put it in a little bit of an interesting context. So as we've been doing basically since March, as we've been continuing with this class despite the shutdown and this wild pandemic that we're experiencing, and we've continued this class. And what we have done is that before every whenever there's a new scenario where we see the Torah, the halachic process, the process of the Torah coming alive in practicality due to the pandemic, so we take a moment to discuss that. So we're going to spend the next couple of weeks discussing there. I thought it was really only going to take us 1 week, but as I'm doing research in this, I think it's going to end up taking us a couple of weeks to discuss the great debate of the COVID vaccine. Tonight we're going to see it's not so much of a debate. There's going to be other debates we're going to come across, but tonight I want to focus on just the basic, simple question, the question I think is on many people's minds, which is, should I take the vaccine? Should I take the vaccine if I am young and healthy and the vaccine may not, and the virus may not have that ill of an effect on me? Should I take the vaccine if I've already had the virus? Should I take the vaccine despite the fact that it may have some side effects? Who knows when? What if I am pregnant? What if there's a lot of what ifs, and I think people are anxious about it. I mean, this was a historic. This was historic from a scientific perspective. The fact that the vaccine was able to be rolled out in such a short amount of 9 months is just, I think unheard of. I mean, Stuart obviously can speak better to this than me, but I think it's unheard of, and I think people have anxiety even with regard to that, which is, was there enough research, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the basic question: should one take the vaccine? Now, as you may know, I am not I do not have a PhD in research. I am not a scientist. And you may also know that I am not a medical doctor. I know enough to be dangerous. I am not a medical doctor. In fact, probably my favorite non-Torah or Chazal quote of all time is from Mark Twain. Be careful reading medical books because you may die of a misprint. I think that during this time, we've kind of fallen trap to, or we didn't listen carefully enough to Mark Twain on this note. So I'm not a doctor. I am a rabbi. I am looking at this from the Torah's perspective. What does the Torah require of me to do with these questions at hand? Okay, so let's begin. Basically, the first step we need to go before we can answer this question, and I don't even think we're going to come full circle this evening in getting to the bottom line, all of the reasons why one needs to get a vaccine or should not, or we'll see where we end up. But, or I might as well spoil it. It would seem as though that if your doctor tells you should get a vaccine, you should get a vaccine. But we're not even going to get tonight all of the reasons why one needs to. We'll get to one of the reasons why one has to, and see what the major poskim are saying. But the first place we have to go is a question that is dealt with from the Ramban al Torah, Nachmanides, 1194 to 1270. The Ramban, Nachmanides, has in a number of different places a general question on emuna. which is that we believe in God, and we believe that God controls the world, controls my health. And if that's the case, so if I get sick, what gives me the right to go to the doctor? So says the Ramban that the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that we are supposed to go to the doctor, and that's actually part of Emunah. Once God, this is what the Ramban explains, once God put into the Teva, put into nature, that there is medicine, and there are people out there that research medicine and research how pharmaceuticals have an effect on us, what is in the nature in order to provide healing mechanisms for us. Therefore, God is kind of telling us this is the avenue to go in order to get better. Don't say, I'm just going to sit back and rely on God. No, we have an obligation. We have an obligation to take care of our health, and we have to be proactive about that. And therefore, we should go to doctors in order to find out. Now, what happens if, let's say, there's a statement from Chazal? Let's say our rabbis tell us that this is a good example. There's a Gemara in Masechah Shabbos that says that the best way to get rid of boils is to wash to get rid of acne is to wash your face in beet juice. So let's say a person is afflicted with acne. So what should they do? So you open up a Gemara in Shabbos and then go stick your face in beet juice. I hate to tell you, but probably nothing's going to happen. What should you do? You go ask the doctor what to do. So, but I understand that's against Chazal. Our rabbis already told us what our responsibility is to do. So it says the Chassam Sofer, don't be ridiculous. The MS says the Chassam Sofer right over here in his chuvas, in his response of the Chassam Sofer, was he passed away in the first I think 1835 or something like that. The Chassam Sofer was the leading authority for Hungarian Jewry, even though he would sign his response as Moshe HaKatan Frankfurt, because he was originally from Frankfurt. But he was really the posek, a revolutionary posek for Hungarian Jewry, and also was the major the major leader, Orthodox leader, that took on the Reform movement, Enlightenment, etc. That was really the Chassam Sofer that led that fight. So the Chassam Sofer writes in his response to the following. He says, "Va'emes Yoredarko ki ha'aminu kabbalas harofim." That the truth of the matter is that it's our responsibility to take what the doctors, kabbalas harofim, what the doctors have accepted to be true, al pi teva, because that's according to nature. Meaning, this is what God put, that Chazal, when they said to wash your face in beet juice, that was the that was the science at the time was saying that that's what you're supposed to do. Research showed later in history that that's not the best thing to do, and therefore you should go and see a dermatologist to find out what the best mode of action is. We find this, in a number of different places in Chazal, where our rabbis saw, based on whatever the science told them at the time, that this is what one is supposed to do. That doesn't mean that is the way it has to be, but rather it means that this is what the doctor said. If the doctors later in history discover that there's something else and we were wrong, great, we were wrong. we were going based on the doctors, because this is exactly what one has to do. There's probably the most, a halacha that is followed, I think, very carefully amongst people, is the halacha of not mixing fish and meat. Okay, we don't mix fish and meat. Why? So the Gemara says because there's some sort of a sakana, there's some sort of a danger if one were to mix fish and meat. So that's why, we have, if someone serves a gefilte fish as an appetizer, so they put it on one plate, and then you clear those plates, and you clear those plates in order so that you could put chicken on, that's being served during the main appetizer, and you don't serve the gefilte fish and the chicken together, right? We keep them separate. This is because the Gemara says that there's some sort of danger involved in mixing fish and meat. Says the Magen Avram, I asked the doctors of my time. The Magen Avram lived in the 17th century. Ask the doctors of my time, and there doesn't seem to be a danger in mixing fish and meat. And if you have to ask the doctors of our time, they would say, yes, there is no danger in mixing fish and meat. So says the Magen Avram, he feels that this is not something that one needs to be machmir in. Generally speaking, the minhag has become to keep them separate, but it's not, you don't have to think that you're eating treif if you're mixing them up, because there really is no more danger anymore. Whatever was thought to be a danger, maybe there was one at some point in history and now there isn't, or maybe they just got it wrong before. But regardless of the matter, the Magen Avraham says you follow the science of the time. And if the science of the time tells you this, then this is what one has to do. If the doctors of the time say that this is what one needs to do in order to be healthy, then therefore this is what one needs to do in order to be healthy. Now, I think that the runner-up in having multiple opinions right after halacha and Judaism, we have 2 Jews, 3 opinions. The runner-up to varied opinions is the medical field. You have doctors that will go across the spectrum in terms of what one should do given a particular situation, especially if it's a new one that has come up. If there's new research that shows something, what is the correct thing to do? So you have doctors across the spectrum telling you different things. So therefore, what is our responsibility? So I've heard from my Rabbi, Rav Hershel Schachter, many times, based on the Chassam Sofer, is that you have to follow the majority. Whatever the consensus is, the majority consensus is, that is the way that a person needs to function. Of course, that is not taking into account subjectiveness. That is not taking into account put into perspective a person's individualized needs. If, let's say, the consensus is that Tylenol is good to take for headaches, but a person has an allergy to acetaminophen, so then one should not take Tylenol, even though there's consensus that it's good for headaches, right? Obviously, it doesn't even need to be said, right? Of course, you have to take into account the subjectiveness. But if a person, relatively speaking, is healthy and the doctor tells them that they should be taking Tylenol, and therefore take Tylenol, okay? So the question is, does this carry over to the coronavirus vaccine? So it would seem to be that based on this Chassam Sofer and based on a number of other factors that we'll get to soon, but just taking it at face value, that if the doctors are saying that one should take the vaccine, so then therefore one should take the vaccine, right? If your doctor tells you, given your specific circumstances, that you should take the vaccine, so then all the more so, you should be taking the vaccine. Now, of course, if the doctor tells you that it would be dangerous for you to take the vaccine for whatever reason, not because they are naysayers of the vaccine, but rather it's because of a subjective issue with you, that you have a history with having reactions to inoculations, for example, okay? So then that's a subjective situation. But generally speaking, taking the vaccine should be highly encouraged based on halacha for the average person in the average situation. Another, I think, very important point to make is, aside for my health, aside for me taking care of Daniel, but there's also the obligation to take care of others. And we know that this is a communicable disease. We know that we don't want this to spread. And that's why vaccines help solve pandemics. That's why vaccines help bring pandemics to an end. By definition, pandemics end. And this is part of the way to get to the end of the pandemic, that eventually this thing will die out. This will help it die out faster. Says the Rambam that we have an obligation to help remove dangers from our midst. Where do we get this from? So the Torah tells us an amazing mitzvah. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, this is my father's favorite mitzvah, maybe because of this Rambam. But there's a mitzvah that if someone has a roof access to either their home or they have roof access to their building, but if someone has roof access, so one is obligated to build a fence around their roof in order so that, God forbid, someone will not fall off of the roof. If someone is going up to the roof to go relax, to go play ball, whatever it might be, sukkahs in Manhattan, you see on rooftops sukkahs in Manhattan as well. So there needs to be a fence on those rooftops. This is what the Torah refers to as la'asod ma'akeh, to build a fence around your roof. Says the Rambam in the Positive Commandments in the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvot, the Rambam's book where the Rambam lists the 613 mitzvahs. We know that the Torah tells us Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morashaki Elas Yaakov. The Torah was given to us through Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Gemara in Makos says that Torah has the gematria of 111. Torah was given to us through Moshe. 611 mitzvos were given to us from Moshe. What about the other two? Those were the first two mitzvos given to us by God himself. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, and you cannot have any lo yelecha elokim acherim al panai. The first two of the 10 commandments were given directly by God. The rest of the mitzvot were given by Moshe. 2 plus 611 equals 613. That's where we come up with a list of 613 mitzvot. And the Rishonim struggle what exactly is included in that list. In fact, the Rambam has like these 14 principles where he goes through building a set of rules and regulations as to what is considered a mitzvah and what is not considered a mitzvah. And the Gra says that, if you open up a Torah, you see that there's a lot more commanded than just 613 things to do. And this is going to be a good example of that, where the Torah says you have to build a fence around your roof, but you see there's going to be a lot more to it than just building a fence around your roof. There's more included in that mitzvah. Says the Gra that it's not 613 commandments and that's it. Rather, there's many, many more commandments, but rather it's 613 principles, Torah principles. Here's a great example of that. Says the Rambam the following in his list of the positive commandments, number 184. We are obligated lahasir hamachshalim v'hasakanos mikol moshvosenu. We have an obligation to remove all dangers from our midst. All stumbling blocks, all dangers, anything that could pose a danger to society, we have an obligation to remove it. V'zeh shenivne kosel sviv hagag. How do we know this? Based on the mitzvah of ma'akeh, building a fence around your roof. Says the Rambam, let's take a step back and think about this. And this is really based on the Gemara in Bava Kama as well. Let's take a step back and think about this. Why does the Torah care so much for me to build a fence around my roof? Why? So the Torah tells us in order so that you don't have blood on your hands. So says the Rambam, based on the Gemara, that if that's the case, so then obviously the Torah cares about me making sure that I build fences around dangers happening. I make sure to remove any sort of danger from our midst. That's why I have to build a fence. That's why I have to do anything that may lead to any sort of danger. The other day during Shacharis, there was, one of the patio heaters in the one that I sit near blew out. Okay, and I didn't notice that it blew out, but it was still emitting gas. So one of our illustrious Gabayim came over and was near me at the end of davening, and he smelled the gas. I didn't smell it. I hope that doesn't mean that I have COVID. No, I'm just joking. I just didn't smell it. So the wind was blowing the wrong way. So he goes over and he says, "Rabbi, you got to turn that off. It's dangerous," right? So he went and he turned it off. Now, obviously, that's a nice thing to do. But not only was it a nice thing to do, according to the Rambam, that was a fulfillment of a positive commandment from the Torah. Okay? A positive commandment of ma'akeh, building a fence. Because ultimately, you have to do things in order to remove any sort of danger. So now, a question that we're going to have to get to next time is, and we still have some more to do. I want to show you some other things, but the question that we're going to have to look into next time is, I understand, let's go to the building the fence example, okay? When it comes to building the fence, so does that put me at any sort of danger? let's say, does building the fence put a danger on me? Is it dangerous for me to build a fence? Of course not, right? As long as I'm being safe in the way I'm building a fence, no one would call it dangerous to do some menial labor of just putting a fence around my roof, right? Or hiring someone to build a fence around my roof is not would not pose a threat to me, right? So with regard to the vaccine, though, there are those out there that have a concern about certain things, and therefore, do I need to now get a vaccine for a small chance that something bad's going to happen to me, being that its likelihood is going to remove a danger from everyone else, being that you need to have a certain amount of immunity, you have to have a certain amount of the population inoculated in order to have that immunity, in order for the pandemic to end quicker, etc., in order for people's lives to be saved and the like. So do I have to put myself into a possible danger in order to save someone else? So this is discussed between it's machlokas between the Sma and it's machlokas between the Sma and the Chalkas Machokek, that in the Beis Yosef quotes the following scenario. Based on the Yerushalmi, it's quoted by the Hagos Maimonides. This is the very, very, very end of Choshe Mishpat, all the way at the end of Choshe Mishpat. This is mamish the last comment that the Beis Yosef makes in the entire encyclopedic catalog of the Beis Yosef. Rabbi Yosef Karo, quoting from the Hagos Maimonides, writes that let's say you are walking through the forest and you're passing by a riverbank and you see someone drowning. So you're a good swimmer and you want to go save this person's life. But of course, that doesn't mean that there is no danger that could be posed to you, right? This is a running river and you have a person drowning, and when a person is drowning, the person that goes to save them, their life is also going to at some level be, because the person could pull you down with them, right? You're a good swimmer. You'll be able to do it probably, but there is a slight danger posed here. Says the Hagos Maimonides, based on the Yerushalmi, one has to jump in and try to save the person. I have to be machnes myself. I have to put myself into a small threat in order to save others. Okay, this is the opinion of the Hagos Maimonides, quoted by the Beis Yosef. Rabbi Yosef Karo, 1488 to 1575, wrote a monumental work called the Beis Yosef, this encyclopedia on Jewish law. When he finished writing the Beis Yosef, he wrote this index, a review system to the Beis Yosef of short halachic statements codifying everything that he wrote in the Beis Yosef. You don't need to go through the entire encyclopedia to know what to do. I'll give you a review manual, the Cliff Notes. That's called the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch is the Cliff Notes of Jewish law. If you want to know everything that there is to know about practical Jewish law, you look in the encyclopedia. If you want to know the Cliff Notes of Jewish law, the handbook, that's the Shulchan Aruch. In the Shulchan Aruch, in the handbook, he does not codify this statement from the Hagos Maimonides. He doesn't make any mention about it. He doesn't say that one needs to put them. He doesn't say that the person would need to jump in to save someone who's drowning. He doesn't say that one should not jump in. He just doesn't talk about it. He doesn't mention it. It's kind of a mystery. Why would he not put it in? Why would he not mention it? If we assume that all of halacha is codified in the Shulchan Aruch as a summary to his major encyclopedia, the Beis Yosef, so then he should have recorded it. Says the Sma, the reason he didn't record it is because maybe he felt that while this is the opinion of the Hagos Maimonides, this is the opinion of the Yerushalmi, I am trying to give you their opinion in the encyclopedia because I quote all the opinions. However, in the Shulchan Aruch, I'm telling you my opinion. And therefore, since I don't feel that one would have to have jumped in to save the individual, so therefore, I am leaving it out of the Shulchan Aruch. This is what the Sma says. However, most poskim say, well, 1 second. When you have a contradiction between the Beis Yosef, the encyclopedia, and the Shulchan Aruch, which one are you going to follow? So many poskim say, well, if you look at the introduction to the Beis Yosef and then the introduction to the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo himself makes his, basically answers this question for us. He tells you what one is supposed to do. And he basically says that the Beis Yosef is the halachic sefer. That is the book. That is the Holy Grail. The Beis Yosef, that's the one you got to follow. The Shulchan Aruch is a review system. The Shulchan Aruch is a manual. It's helpful. Basically, the way you kind of have to think about it is like, if let's say a person was trying to understand Einstein's theory of relativity, okay? Say you want to understand the theory of relativity. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either read through the entire thesis, the entire work that was done by Einstein, read through the research that Einstein published himself in order to understand the theory of relativity. Or you can go on YouTube and Google, search on Google, on YouTube, Einstein's theory of relativity, and I'm sure you'll get 100 different 2-minute cartoon videos that explain the theory of relativity in a very clear way. Now, those videos, I'm sure a lot of them are very accurate. But if you want to really know what the theory of relativity is in its full sense and understand every part of it, you go to the original document. Says Rabbi Yosef Karo, that's what the Beis Yosef is. Just because I may have missed something in the Shulchan Aruch, okay, like that happens. As long as it's in the Beis Yosef, that means it's halacha. And therefore, most majority poskim say, therefore, there would be an obligation to jump into the river to save the fellow. If you know how to drown, it'd only be a slight danger for you to save someone else's life. So therefore, based on this, there's a slight potential danger, like with everything, okay? There's a slight, it's new. People are unfamiliar with this, new technology and the like. Which again, like I said, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a doctor. Therefore, I can't speak to the details of that. But I am going based on the majority of doctors, the consensus of doctors, the consensus of epidemiologists and the like that are saying that one should take the coronavirus vaccine based on what the Chassam Sofer told me, and also based on the fact that if that's the way that this pandemic can end sooner, therefore I have an obligation from the Torah based on the Rambam and based on the Beis Yosef to take it. There is so much more to this discussion, though. We are not doing it complete justice. I would encourage everyone to come back, God willing, next week and the following week, probably, where we unpack it further and see more elements to the discussion. But I want to just close the discussion by just showing you a few different videos from our Gedolei HaPoskim across the spectrum, where you have Rav Asher Weiss Shlita, you have Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the Sephardic. That Rav Asher Weiss is a Kloisenberger Chassid, probably the most sought after posek in Eretz Yisrael right now. You have from Israel, the Ashkenazic view, you have Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the Sephardic chief rabbi, and you have Rav Hershel Schechter, where there's an actual video of him getting the vaccine. So let me pull up these clips. Each one's about between 1 and 3 minutes, but they're worth seeing.
So since the beginning of this pandemic, I feel a responsibility and an obligation to express what I believe in, even though sometimes it's not very comfortable, because I know that not everybody will like what I say. However, always express myself in a respectful manner. I have no reason in the world, and I don't like to argue and to dispute and to be mezalzel in others. But if I won't speak my mind, I think it would be a sin. It would be an avera. And I do think that people in a position like me have a chiyuv to say what they believe in. And if I would be zeicher to save one person or more than one person, yehi zeh schori. Chazal say, kol hamakayim nefesh achas misol ki kiyem oilem molei. So with what I say,
if you save, this is what the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, that if you save even just one life, so it's as if you save the entire world, describing how great of a responsibility it is for him to share his point of view that one should be getting the vaccine.
Will save one person, one family from tragedy and from sorrow and from mourning. That's doitus. Those are generations. So as inconvenient as it might be, I do feel that it is my chiyuv to clearly say what I believe in. I'm not a spokesman of Misrad Briyut.
Misrad Briyut is the health ministry in Israel. So he's not a spokesman. He was not hired by the Department of Health.
Wasn't asked to be a spokesman of Misrad Briyut. I'm a spokesman of the Shulchan Aruch. Ner leraglai, and the only guiding light I have is halacha and Torah. I do consult specialists, otherwise my words would be lacking. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, but I do possess some basic intelligence, at least to understand what I read and to understand what is explained to me. And I am in touch with top specialists, scientists and researchers and doctors in Eretz Yisrael and abroad. So
I think he's making himself very clear that, you know, we follow doctors, we follow what the consensus is, and that very much so in these kinds of scenarios dictates halacha. Listen to Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef taking a bit of a more even harif stance than Rav Asher Weiss.
טוב, יש שסומכים על הרופאים יום הכיפורים. למה נסמוך עליהם גם פה אצלנו? לכן, מסקנת הדברים, יש חובה לכל אחד ואחד להתחסן, לא להתחשב.
There's an obligation on every single person להתחסן to become inoculated.
מוציאים כל מיני פשקווים, כל מיני דברים, כל מיני שטויות שממציאים. לפי ההלכה, אם שואלים...
You shouldn't listen to the conspiracy theories out there. You have to follow what the doctors say, and there's an obligation to do so.
מה ההלכה אומרת? אנחנו ראשי ההלכה, מדברים פה ההלכה. ההלכה מה אומרת? כן, כל אחד ואחד צריך להתחסן, לפי מה שאומרים הרופאים. מי שעבר את הנגיף הזה, עבר אותו בקלות, לא בקלות, יש לו נוגדנים, הורים שישב בשלב זה, לא צריך לעשות חיסון. אולי יותר מאוחר, אולי עוד שנה, לא יודע כמה, שישמע על הרופאים. מה שאומר הרופא של...
says that there are people going around saying, you know what, I'm going to let everyone else take it first, and then I'll take it. And he's saying, no, that's where Emunah comes in. That is where Emunah comes in. You follow the doctors, assuming that they're good doctors, and you know that again, there's a consensus here, right? And if the consensus is among the leading doctors, the ethical doctors that are saying that this is the right way to go, then it's the right way to go. Now, that isn't to say that a person should be discouraged from learning about it and understanding what they're going to be engaged in. I think that in general in life, that's an important thing to do. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, one needs to follow the general consensus. Again, this is from an objective standpoint. Obviously, there could be subjective scenarios that may change a person's outcome for whatever particular reason. But from an objective halachic standpoint, all else equal, one would be obligated to get the vaccine. There's Mori V'Rabbi, Hagon Rabbi Herschel Schechter. This is that when I saw this to me was a very powerful moment, because he's been holding Klal Yisrael on his shoulders for like 55 years, but it's been highlighted to the nth degree during this pandemic. And watching him, get the vaccine is a really, really powerful thing.
Was that? Okay. Good. That was it? Yes.
So this is Rabbi Mordechai Willig, who's also Rosh Yeshiva at YU and also a posek that's been dealing with a lot of these shilas.
You have great fingers.
Thank you. I highly recommend everyone should take the vaccine. Thank you very much.
Be in touch, okay?
The research is the first one to develop a vaccine. We should use it to protect ourselves and protect the whole community.
Yeah, that's I think a pretty clear remark from Rabbi Schechter that he feels that everyone should take it, and we should thank the Ribbono Shel Olam that Baruch Hashem it only took a few months to develop the vaccine, and relatively speaking, this is a very short, very short period of time, and Baruch Hashem we have the science available to us to have developed it, and hopefully, Mirz Hashem, of course, at the end of the day, everything's in Hashem's hands. At the end of the day, it's all up to Hashem. Hashem decides that the vaccine was how we were going to get out of it. So then that's the way it's going to be. And if Hashem decides that, you know what? No, this is not the direction. Okay, then that's just the way. At the end of the day, Hashem's in control. But we also have to have emunah that Hashem put into the teva, put into nature, the way that things work, and we have to follow the consensus of the doctors. This is what the halacha commands of us in order to take care of ourselves and to take care of others. We'll stop here for now. To be continued next week, delving more into this robust topic. All right, we'll stop here. I can hang on if anyone has any questions.